chief guest who was supposed to be really inaugurating the session, but unfortunately, as he is caught in the traffic, the fireside chat will precede the coming of the fire. So, but it's okay. That's reality of changing times. Where is Mani Rao? Hi, Mani. Pleasure to have you here. All right. Viraf wants to introduce me. That's good.
Let's introduce Adil to the gathering.
You know, when we started planning this conclave, Temas and I thought we needed one person who would pivot the panel discussions, fireside chats, advise on programs, think out of our two brains and our committee's brains, and take the heat away from us. The first name that came to my mind was Adil. When I called him, he immediately said yes. Dr. Adil, but I'll call him Adil. Adil has been instrumental in planning many facets of this conclave program. This is in spite of the fact that he's extremely busy, resides in Bombay 5 days of the week, and travels a lot. Adil wears many hats. Personal friend of mine, sitting BPP trustee, big HR honcho, and many more. He's currently the CEO of a boutique business management consultancy called The Firm. Adil holds a degree in commerce, a bachelor's degree in law, a master's degree in human resources management from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He's attended the Coca-Cola Wharton School, advanced management program, and has been bestowed a Cosa Honoris Doctorate in philosophy. Adil has over 4 decades of top management corporate experience in India and overseas. And he has worked in reputed, professionally managed large national and international companies. Listen to these companies: Godrej, GE, Marks and Spencer, Coca-Cola, and SR at board levels in areas of leadership, HR, IR, and labor laws. He was initially associated with Manek Gagrat and Company. Adil has experience of corporate working in areas of law, industrial relations, human resources, marketing, and OD at senior management and board levels. He is now full-time into business management consultancy and advisory services. He is a much sought-after business coach to some of the most recognized CEOs of India. An avid reader, Adil writes in several magazines and is well quoted for his thought leadership and creative opinions. He's a well-recognized doodler. That's why you got the doodle here. A social media enthusiast, a reputed keynote speaker, and he plays the Mohan Veena. I didn't know that. He's also a TEDx speaker. Adil has won several national and international awards, including the HR Grandmaster Award at the WHR Congress. He's ranked amongst the top 110 influential global leaders by People Hum, a global ranking organization. There are many, many things more to say about him, but I'll give the floor to him now. He will be giving us his thoughts on leadership and moderating the fireside chat today. I invite him to take this forward now. And thank you so much for all you've done for this conclave, Adil.
Welcome. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And indeed, thank you for giving me such a decorated introduction. These are some of the reasons why I insist on carrying my wife along, because at home she doesn't believe I have all of that. It's only when she hears it in some conventions and conferences. So thank you, Zubina, for coming over. So we all live in exciting times. And of course, we saw the exciting times. We had a chief guest to come, and unfortunately he couldn't come, and therefore sudden excitement changed, and someone who was supposed to come later on has to come a little further, and things like that. So we live in all kinds of exciting times. And life in general, which is very ambivalent and equivocal, just that nothing seems to be predictable. If you were to draw the chart of what we call the punctuated equilibrium of the world, you would draw a chart where, big changes in life are made at long periods of intervals, and then small changes keep happening in between, and then suddenly comes a little period of time when so many changes happen that by the time you realize what happened, a new change comes, and by the time you get adjusted to the new change, yet another change comes, and by the time that another change you adjust, another change comes. and then again it steadies down over a period of time for millions of years when the new gap comes in and new changes are made. We are living in such kind of exciting times, ambivalent, unpredictable. We really don't know what's going to happen. Markets are unpredictable and challenged beyond creative imagination. Earlier, at least, we could say, okay, start thinking creatively about what's going to happen. But we are now living in times where the real changes happening are actually challenging even your creative thinking, and it goes much beyond that. Black swan events, which used to happen occasionally to transmit the shifts in the entire change, are now coming so repeatedly that actually they say the normal life is happening between two consecutive black swan events, which are very, very small recess in between each other. At that pace, the kind of changes are happening. Resources and profits, and we experienced it during the COVID time, that resources and profits seem to vanish faster than snowflakes under pressure. And we saw how great companies which had tremendous amounts of profits thought that they would be able to manage the COVID period, suddenly under pressure collapsed and couldn't exist in that kind of marketplace. Uncertainty, despair, anxiety, depression are natural outcomes of human responses to these kinds of changes which we are going to face. And given this situation, there are apparently two things that most of the management literature and things like consultants are talking about. One is that, of course, businesses need to be very, very agile, because you will be expected to make very, very fast creative changes and things like that to bring in the business interventions. So agility becomes very, very critical. But this fireside chat is uniquely created to bring to floor a very, very critical narrative to flourish our organizations with spiritual intelligence, because spiritual intelligence in an organization creates two situations, particularly in the kind of disruptive times, ambivalent times that we are living in. It creates two things. Number one, it brings a certain element of hope in the business, because that makes you give a confidence that, okay, we are going to be surviving, we are going to succeed, we are going to do something else. But more important than that, your spiritual intelligence will end up giving you that distinct and unique, sustainable market advantage, which is what your value creation exercise in such kind of times require. A unique and distinctive market advantage, and that advantage comes with an organization which has a very, very strong spiritual intelligence, and this is what we are doing. The next 2 days of the convention, we are going to be focusing on agility, fragility, and things like that, and anti-frigidity of the organizations. We're going to discuss all of those elements. But whilst we are going to do that, this evening is about focusing on trying to understand how critical is getting the spiritual intelligence of your organization right. And to be able to do that, we are going to put this entire schema of things through 4 lenses. I'm going to be talking about the first lens of the fire chat, and that is going to be about spiritual intelligence. The second frame that we are going to put in is the esoteric frame of our religion. And Edward Marisman is going to be talking to us about what is the criticality of this esoteric elements of our religion, and how do these esoteric elements help us effectively to become successful in our business life. The third is the artistic lens we are going to put in with my petite friend out here, Perrine Padamji Koyaji, who has done the entire fantastic work of calligraphy around the 1001 names of Aso-Zarathustra, and what prompted her to get in there, and what are the critical 5 or 7 names from 1001 names which have got implications, which we can draw on and get our energy to be able to see, okay, how through the literature these are critical values businesses can induct. And the fourth lens is the musical lens, where my friend Mani Rao is going to sing for us a very important monajat and tell us. So trying to look at this entire thing not only from a business intervention point of view, because we are all leaders and corporate entrepreneurs, so we would certainly want to see that, and that is what we will see tomorrow and day after. But today's session is much more about trying to understand the spiritual and the esoteric and the artistic representations of our religion and what lessons they end up teaching us. So let's come to the first lens, which I wanted to talk about for a short while. And that takes me to Donna Zohar, and I think some of you must have heard. She's one of the greatest management thinkers, contemporary management thinkers alive today. And Donna Zohar, she comes from MIT and is a Harvard graduate and has written fantastic books, acknowledged world across, is one of the finest management thinkers, brought the concept of spiritual intelligence for the first time into the mind space of the corporate world through a very, very beautiful book called Rewiring the Corporate Brain. Of course, thereafter, many people, the copycats of the world, talked about re-engineering the inner selves and things like that. But the original thought came from Donna, who really wrote that book called Re-engineering the Corporate Brain. Succinctly, she explained that spiritual intelligence is the intelligence of the soul as applied to human endeavors of creating value in enterprise. So as the organization starts creating value and you engage yourself in the process of value creation, spirituality is that language of the soul which you hear, though it's not spoken, and are able to convert that into its applicable principles as you go around creating value in your businesses. And finally, we being entrepreneurs and business leaders are generally going to be focused on how do we create value. Spirituality gives you that edge by making you listen to the voice of your soul, which tells you what are the things you ought to do and what are the things you don't need to be doing. It is about a leader's ability to find meaning, to find purpose, and driving the values in life and transferring the same to the organization's culture so that collectively the enterprise makes money. In fact, I remember reading somewhere in an interview, Mr. Ratan Tata was told that what is the difference between you and the Reliance company, because you took so many years to grow and become what you are versus Reliance has barely taken some 60, 70 years and become that. So he said the difference is that they are cutthroat, smart businessmen. We are institution builders and industrialists, and that is the difference. So it is the application of the spirituality quotient to your business that ends up making the real sustainable long-term competitive market advantage, and that is what we are going to talk about. Now, I am going to be taking some elements of the Zoroastrian eschatology and talk about the cardinal angel theory or the cardinal theory of the doctrine of the Amishaspans, which is very, very cardinal to us. And are there lessons that we can pick up from this doctrine of the Amishaspans which can help us determine the spirituality quotient and the spirituality inspiration that organizations need to be able to sustain in this kind of disruptive world that we are living in? Now, most of us are quite familiar with this doctrine, and for some of you who may not be aware, that the cardinal Zoroastrian doctrine of Amishaspan is predominantly about the 7 angels that Lord Zarathustra, at some point of time, not Lord Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda, identified with an intention to say, how is the world order going to operate? And businesses and entrepreneurs are actually part of the larger world order. Therefore, if the world order observes that, businesses and all of that would naturally be far more influenced by some of these theories that we are going to talk about. So he said, and he created the 7 Amishaspans. And those are the real powerful angel followers or angels or supporters of Ahura Mazda. And he created these heptads of good happiness. So number 1 was Pentamenu, also known as Hormazda. The second was Vahumana. The third was Astavahishti. The fourth, Shastriya Vairya. The fifth, Spenta Armiti. The sixth, Hurvatat. And the seventh, Amartat. Now between these 7 Amishaspentas, each one was given a certain role. But Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, reserved wisdom as part of his control, which is a lesson for all of us when we are driving lessons in organizations, that as a central leader, whilst you are part of a large team, and very beautiful that though Ahura Mazda is supposedly to have created all of this, he is also considered as part of the heptatad which means he is part of the seven Amish husbands, though he is the creator of it, beautifully to say that as a leader, you are supposed to be actually driving a role, making the team believe you are a part of the team and not the most powerful man on the team, and yet be able to control the final outcomes of what the business or what the entire world will deliver to you. And he did that by holding on to wisdom, because he believed that wisdom and balance are the ultimate controlling points at which, between the alternatives available at each point of time in human life, wisdom would drive the balance, and therefore he controlled, and therefore Auramas, throughout our entire literature, is referred to as the wise lord. And wisdom is the critical value that is given to him. He then created Vahumana, and which are, if you look creatively, these are the qualities that leaders and organizational cultures need to reflect. Because finally, when you look at what are the kind of companies that have succeeded to effectively come out, are not companies which had a lot of money, but companies which believed in people, reflected empathy, and tried to work towards that. So then he created Vahumana, the good mind, the quiet and the calm mind that is required to do good things, which a leader is supposed to be reflecting in his life. Beyond being wisdom, you are supposed to be very calm. You are supposed to bring goodness into life. You are supposed to translate those elements of goodness. These are spiritual values. Of course, you have to do the right things in the business, in the market world, but these are the guiding principles that you need to be having to be able to drive your business effectively. Ashtavahishti is about righteousness, is about integrity, is about justice. Why we see some very, very effective companies overlooking, say for example, so many times when we are advising companies, we find they do not really take serious implication of the whistleblowers who come and tell that some wrong things are happening because some of their most favorite men are involved in the whistleblower activities as having done wrong things, or sexual harassment policies where some of the very, very critical members of their team have indulged in some of these acts and they don't want to take action because, of course, whilst it is important that for others you would do it, but for some of your friends you don't do it. But that is exactly where organizations go wrong, because it is very important that righteousness and integrity and justice be parts of your spiritual journey that you're running your organization. Spenta Armaiti is predominantly a power given in his heptad, which is humility. As a leader, you are supposed to be humble. You may be as powerful as you want, but unless and until you were to reflect humility, you will not be able to succeed. Unless and until there is tolerance, because not everyone is going to do the right thing. There will have to be tolerance. This is the value of Spenta Armaiti bringing onto the heptad, which is part of the spirituality journey. Now, it looks very esoteric and high-flown, but if you look at the spiritual values, which some of the companies identify, some Indian companies, of course, I know, write down a lot of these spiritual values and make it into very attractive frames and put it behind the cabinet and the wall of the CEO, which is half the time even he has forgotten what those values really stand for. But there are certain companies which filter their organization processes with these spiritual values. And therefore, the question that was asked to me, I also keep advising the Bombay Chambers of Commerce and the Babson University team which had come in one day met me, and they looked at my profile. Somewhere I had written down WZCC. So they asked me this question, that Mr. Malia, I want to know that is WZCC, and of course I always, when I talk about WZCC, half the time I have to explain who Zoroastrians are about. But this time I didn't have to, because having come, he was apparently Zubin Mehta's very good friend, so he knew what Zoroastrianism was all about. And he asked me that WZCC is a Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce. Is it Zoroastrian because you limit the admission of people who are only Zoroastrians by their birth? Or is there a predetermined model that you are prescribing to your members to follow if they want to be members of your Chamber of Commerce? So is there a prescribed value that people are supposed to be follow as entrepreneurs and leaders if they want to be members? And of course, I evaded the answer because I certainly knew that we were at one point of time only from the admission perspective, Zoroastrian Chambers of Commerce. The prescribed model as such was not there. But this is exactly the criticality of why organizations need to remove the dilutions and bring in some of these values into the operating business models of their organizations to be good. If you look at this heptad model is further supported by 30 hamkaras. And each of these hamkara has a role to say how critical your organization has to be and how well you need to organize your department in terms of capabilities of these angels who have defined roles and who support. I don't know if you're aware of it, that if you look at the Zoroastrian calendar, the hamkaras are of 4 types. And these hamkaras are in a structured power order, which you may not have realized. There are 3 days who are supposed to be actually assisting Ahura Mazda in the fulfillment of his role. And therefore they are Dep Adar, Dep Meher, Dep Din. All those days are the 3 hamkaras who are supposed to be the power assistants, the senior vice presidents of your organization who are supposed to be assisting the CEO. Look at it from that perspective. Structured organization on competency basis. And if those are the larger lessons that we need to pick in, we need to define the social intelligence of our organization from the lessons we pick up. I'm going to quickly summarize this piece by telling what are the 5 transferable lessons that we can really pick up. Number 1, as I said, a well-organized structure is what every organization requires, with clear definitions of roles, with clear duties allocated. Oftentimes, even now in today's world, when we look into the organization and we go for diagnosis, we find that the most simple is the organization structure, which is so confused that it doesn't end up delivering. And that's the first lesson that you'll pick up. Wisdom and balance are the ultimate controlling points of the CEO. It is not the power structure, it is not the career you offer, it is not the shares that you offer, it is not the ESOPs, it is not the promotions, it is not the commissions you offer, but it is the wisdom that the leader brings onto the table, which is very, very critical. And that is a lesson that most of our Parsi organizations could take back if you were to look upon this model or this doctrine of Amisa Spentas to be able to deliver value to us. Inclusive role of the leader is included, but he is not constantly throwing his weight around. He is letting his people run the organization, but constantly controlling them through wisdom. And that's a lesson for all of us. Values reflected in the culture, the spiritual values. There are 8 spiritual values that we look at. What are those? Wisdom, truth, righteousness, and I spoke about some of this, clarity, fairness, social responsibility, and diversity. If you look at the male and the female ratio, there are equal numbers of female and equal numbers of male in the entire angelic model that we are talking about. Diversity is absolutely part of our religious eschatology, and that is very important that all of us need to drive in the organizations. And the last and the most important that I would like to take on is the Farsokat. And of course, Marzban is very famous for his writings on the Farsokrati, which predominantly means that the final renovation back to purity instead of destruction. Our religion does not believe in the ultimate destruction, but believes in the ultimate renovation and creating purity all over again, and which is what resilience is all about. If I use the word resilience, everybody who's come overseas and read management literature understands resilience. The greatest resilience comes also from our religion, which talks about Farsokrati, and that's how we could be drawing. So this, ladies and gentlemen, was trying to put in for the fireside chat and leaving a worm of a thought in your brain that actually organizations require strong spiritual intelligence to be able to survive the kind of times that we are facing. And that is possible if we claim that we are really the Zoroastrian chambers of commerce, which is not limiting only in terms of admission, but in terms of its beliefs, in terms of the models, in terms of the behaviors we want to drive. Then the Amisa Spenta model, the Faresta model, which is also called, is a great model to draw on. And this is a message I leave behind with you. From this lens, I'm going to invite Marzban Hathiram Ervat Marazban Hathiram really requires no introduction for people who have known him, have read his articles, have read his books, really know that he is the one who has been one of the esoteric champions writing about our religion. I'm going to invite him. He is actually an Ervat, a Navar and a Martab. He comes from the Navsari Bhagalia group and is a finance professional who worked with Kalyaniwala and Mystery until a long period of time and worked in corporate finance as a finance controller until he decided to then dedicate his life and career to religion. He became the Panthaki of some Agyaris in Bombay and thereafter moved to Udwada, where I understand he has set up his own boutique dadga, which he serves from Udwada. We couldn't have found a better person to talk about the esoteric lens of the religion than Marazban. So Marazban, may I now invite you to please come.